Okay.
Excellent.
Where do new ideas come from? And why is thinking of something new so difficult? Well, the reason is because our brains are designed to think habitually. That's why I don't have to get up every morning and wonder where my sock is, because it's exactly where I left it last night. So our brains think habitually. Every time we come across something new, we compare it to everything we've seen or heard of before, and we catalogue it according to what we already know. So our brain's designed to think habitually. The only problem is habitual thinking doesn't create new ideas. So we have to, if we want to think of a new idea, we need to avoid habitual thinking. And this is easier said than done, but there's a few techniques we can use to avoid habitual thinking in order to create a new idea. One of them is to introduce randomness. Okay, so today someone was wanting to create a book cover. It was a book about worship, and all they could think of was a photo of someone with their hands raised in worship. But there's already lots of books with a cover with someone with raised hands. So the idea was, how can we do something different? One way of doing that, as I said, is to introduce a random idea. So I reached into my pockets, and I love picking up rubbish off the ground, little treasures I find here and there. And I reached into my pocket and I pulled out, I don't know whether you can see this, but it's a pulley from a curtain. This attracted, I just picked this off the street, and so I pulled this out and I said, okay, how are we going to create a cover with a connection to a pulley? I introduce a random idea, a pulley, and now we're going to think how we can create a book cover about worship from a curtain pulley. Well, this is used for hanging curtains on. Curtains. Do we part a curtain to enter the presence of God? Okay, we've got a visual idea here. Maybe we can use a curtain. A pulley is also used to lift up heavy objects or raise things upwards. So in worship, we're lifting ourselves or lifting our praises to God. So you can see that introducing a random element takes us away from our habitual thinking, which is hands raised in worship. That's a random element. Another challenge today was someone wanting to create a book cover for the content of the book was correspondence, letters being written from one person to another. Okay, we think of letters being written. So what are we going to have on the cover? A pen writing, a hand holding a pencil or a pen, some handwriting superimposed on a face. This is habitual thinking. So how are we going to avoid habitual thinking to create a new idea for a book about correspondence, people writing letters to each other? Another way, rather than introducing something random, another way we can do this is to reduce the intention of the book or the content of the book to its essence. So it's not really about letter writing. What's letter writing about? It's about entering into intimacy. Okay, so if we think of intimacy, this is a word that takes us a distance away from letter writing. Then we can think of other things that express intimacy. Or the letter writing was all about someone who was very lonely, trying to reach out to not feel lonely. So loneliness might be a theme for the cover. So we could have something that's solitary. The idea that came up was an egg, because the author's name had a double meaning in her language, which meant egg. So then we thought of one egg impossibly balancing on top of another, which introduces the idea of a balancing act. And this also was one of the themes in this book of correspondence. A third way of introducing or avoiding habitual thinking is to turn around the idea or do the opposite of what we intend to do, or invert the idea. Someone had the idea of a comic book telling the story of Joseph, but they wanted to do something new with the story of Joseph. So here we have the idea, the name of the Bible character in Genesis, Joseph. How can we invert this to create something new? How about, instead of a male, making it female? So he went away to think of how he could make a comic book about a story about Josephine, recasting the Bible story with a female protagonist instead of a male protagonist.
Perfect.